everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 136. Today I'm going to talk about Swing States 2012. It's a solitaire game from Victory Point Games. It's a recent release, and I figured I would release this. I'm releasing this today, in case you're watching this in the future. Today is Election Day 2012. So it's presidential election today, and for those of you watching this sort of in real time, since I know you can't get enough of election coverage, I figured I'd cover an election game. So this game is entitled Swing States, so it's very much focused on a handful of states, swing states as it were. And so I'll talk a little bit about the gameplay and how it works, and also a little bit sort of my thoughts on how it sort of takes its steps to simulate an election. And it's focused on swing states, which in this current year, and it seems like most years recently, are really the only states that are in play. Like, for example, I live in Idaho. Idaho is, I will bet $1,000 it's going to go red. And obviously if you're in California or New York, some is probably going to go more blue. So these are focused on the states that are sort of, they're going to swing, like Ohio, Florida, those kinds of things. And it's also very much a card-driven game. If you played a States of Siege game, it kind of has its roots in there. The designer mentioned that in the notes. And so the cards are going to come up. They're going to be different sort of events and headlines that your campaign is going to have to manage. So you can actually pick, in this case, a candidate if you want. You don't have to play a specific candidate, you can play a side. So you could play a Democrat, you could play a Republican. Or you can actually pick a candidate like Barack Obama or Mitt Romney or Ron Paul or Hillary Clinton or whoever. There's a bunch of candidates in here. So let me show you how it works, and I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about what I think. So let me give you a real high-level overview of what comes in the game. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take this sheet here, and you can choose either the Democratic room or the Republican situation room. So let's say I choose the Democratic side in this case, and you can see here we've got the different states in these different regions. It's going to lay out a little bit differently, and you're going to start putting tokens on here a little bit differently based on the side that you choose. So at setup, you're going to place these markers here on each of these regions. So you see here we've got the north, and you've got a little dotted area here. I'm going to go ahead and put this campaign marker here on this side here, which is the campaign side. You can see it's got sort of a yellow stop sign. There's another side to these called the advertising side, which I'll explain in a second, but you start everything with the stop sign here in each of the different little areas here. So you'll start here, the south. This is a little bit further down. You don't have as many states. If you're the Democratic side in the south, it tends to lean a little bit Republican. Whereas the Midwest, it gives you a little bit more of an advantage. You can kind of see these are sort of purpley looking states here, sort of more Democratic favored. You got like Ohio here in the middle, sort of a nice sort of blended hue there. And then what you're trying to do basically in the game is get all of these up as high as you possibly can. And then if you go all the way through the deck of cards, if you're going to count and basically count up all the electoral votes. Now you don't need the 270 like you do in the normal election. All the states not represented here are considered to either be going for, the Democrat or the Republican, like I said earlier. So there's a target amount. It's different for each side. The Democrats actually need 95 to win, and the Republicans need 169. So the sides do actually play out quite a bit differently. The Democrat, it seems like more of the cards here are sort of hindering the Democrats, so I think you sort of start off a little bit stronger. You have a little bit more of an advantage, but then you've got to sort of retain that advantage over the course of the campaign. Whereas the Republicans, they start off with a little bit more of a disadvantage, but the cards aren't quite as harsh for them. But you've got to spend a lot of time sort of pushing your luck and sort of pushing these up from the beginning. So if you ever get all your markers up here to the top, and then you do an action that would push one of these up and would basically sort of cascade, you'll have a landslide victory and immediately end the game. The counterpoint to that is if you have everything here at the bottom, and then another event maybe happens to push one of these down, which would cascade all of the bottom ones, then you have sort of a landslide defeat, sort of a fiasco. So if neither of those happens, then you go all the way through the deck and then you count up all your votes. If you have the target number of electoral votes, you win. So the second thing you're going to do is you're going to choose your candidate. So for historical realism, let's say I choose President Obama. And then I will also choose my vice presidential nominee here. And you can see I've got Joe Biden there. So what I'll do is actually put Obama here, and then Biden under here, and then I've sort of got my ticket. Now each of these have different special abilities, some other little icons here which I'm not going to go into, It's just, there's a lot to learn with the game, and you can sort of see what kind of challenge they may provide. Then you've got the Republicans here, so I could, if I wanted to do like a fantasy setting, I could have Newt Gingrich running against him with a vice presidential nominee of, who's this guy? Mitch Daniels from Indiana. And so I could do that, or I could do Ron Paul, I could do Huckabee, I could do Bachmann, Santorum, I could do Governor Romney, and then I could also choose, Paul Ryan here. So depending on what you choose, you're actually going to sort of adjust your starting setup here. So Gingrich may make you have more of a disadvantage in the South if you're running against him, whereas Ron Paul will give you more of a disadvantage in the West, etc. And then you can sort of choose like a scenario in a sense. So if you are the challenger, which means you're challenging the incumbent, you'll just put this in front of you. Or if you are the incumbent, you'll put this in front of you. Or you could do it where there isn't a current president, so you could sort of try to reenact sort of a 2008 or 2016 election where there is no current president and it's two guys sort of going at it. So outgoing president is a Democrat, your nominee is a Republican, or your nominee is a Democrat. Then what it's going to give you are these symbols here, and these are the economic symbols. So if a card comes up with a bull market, that's going to be good for you if you're the incumbent, obviously, because if you're the guy in power, then you get all the credit. Or if you're the guy in power and it's a bear market, then it's going to go down. No matter what the situation actually is, the card's going to have an effect on you, positive or negative, depending on your situation. And you've got 4 decks of cards that are closely related. So your main deck of cards here are these inner news daily cards. And you're actually going to remove quite a few of these from the game, so you won't be able to sort of count on, the certain cards coming up. The other thing that you can do, the instructions provide, is you can actually sort of, it's called like the pundit game. So you go through and you take out a certain number of these, and then what you do is you take out the ones that you think that are sort of historical, and maybe even put them in the right historical order, sort of as these events, different things happen, like so. So what you're going to do on your turn is actually draw one of these cards, and it gives you sort of a little flavorful headline. Talk radio generates a drumbeat of support. So you can see here, if you were the Republican, this would actually help you, and you're the Democrat, it's actually going to hurt you in the South and in the border states. So it's sort of a conditional card, sort of right-wing radio sort of generating a bunch of stuff. What's another one here? Democrats point to gender gap. So if you're the Democrat, then it's going to affect something. Most of the cards are going to have a straight up sort of yellow marker here. So you're going to pull this. So these are some shootings that happen. Renew Second Amendment debate. So the West is going to drop. And then you're going to place the presidential marker and the vice presidential marker of the opponent in the regions on the board. And I'll show that in a second. And then you may put a scandal marker in a region as well. And these are also going to tell you the amount of campaign finance money that's going to come in on this turn. So in this case, you get $2. There's another example. The Midwest is going to drop, and then the scandal marker is going to go into the West. You get $2. Now, some of the cards here, just a couple of the examples of the bear market and the bull market. And you can see these aren't necessarily down arrows. They could actually go up based on whether or not you're the incumbent or not. And then you get $1 here. So there's a whole bunch of these. And then there's some of these orange American politics cards. Now if you're playing the normal game, you're going to shuffle all these in. And these are some different events that are going to happen. There's a few of these that are debates. So when you draw one of these, you're actually going to draw 2 cards off of this campaign watch deck and then put it on top of this deck. So you're going to draw this and go, oh, there's a debate coming up. Okay, so I can kind of take a look at it, see what's going to happen. And then there's a little debate table that's pretty much the same. There's basically 2 presidential debates and 1 vice presidential debate. So you're going to take 2 cards and put these on top of those without looking at them. And then you have to deal with these cards here. And then the debate's going to happen. Then there's some steps to prepare for the debate, which I'll talk about in a second. So you're basically going to, the idea is to go through all the way through this deck. Again, you're going to remove some cards. And then hopefully you can either get a landslide victory or at least avoid a landslide defeat and then count up your electoral votes. Now these opposition research cards, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail, but I just wanted to show them to you, will be a stack of cards that you shuffle them up, and then you can take an action to pull this up and sort of like, digging up dirt on your opposition candidate. Now there are a few in here that are October surprise cards. What we're actually going to do is take these and put them at the bottom of this campaign watch deck. So after you go through this deck and you've gone through all the debates, this campaign watch deck will be pretty small. And so there'll be like 3 cards left in this. And then any October surprises are going to be at the bottom of that. So you're going to finish going through this and then do the October surprise, which is actually going to favor you. So you know that you've got this sort of coming up at the end of the game to sort of surprise your opponent with. It's pretty cool. So after you draw a card and resolve all the actions on there, and maybe place the president or vice presidential markers in whatever space it's going to say, then you're going to get some actions. Now the actions are all nicely laid out on this board here, and you've got some other little areas on the side that will kind of help you sort of as a cheat sheet in the game. And on the other side of this is a map here. You can get an idea here, and it's got some of the end game scoring ideas here on this side. So we'll take a look at this side here and see what you can do. So the game comes with a set of little individual tokens here like so. The main thing you're going to be looking at here is your campaign finance. So it's going to start at a 2, and then depending on whatever the card is that you have here, you're going to get a certain number of money every turn. And that basically dictates your actions. So if I got that 3, I'll bump that up to a 5. And then you can basically spend money to take these actions. And most of them cost $1, but some of them cost a little bit more, and you're going to spend and spend and spend and spend. Now you can't save this money turn by turn. You can have a max save of $1 every turn. So you basically have to spend your money. The other little stat here is going to be the war chest, and you can actually take an action if your presidential nominee is here in the campaign headquarters, this little box here. You can only do certain actions if this marker is here. A lot of times what you're going to be doing is sort of bouncing between here and the board over here to basically give yourself a little bonus when you try to do advertising or other actions here. In a certain region, you'll want the nominee, you're going to flip it over to the use side to give you a little bit of a bonus, a die roll modifier. Or excuse me, a re-roll of the die. But if he's in here, you can basically take an action to put some money in your war chest, and you can slowly move this up and up and up. And then you can spend it to give yourself, plus a certain amount every turn. So it's a good idea to sort of build up a war chest early in the game if you can, and then you can sort of have a lot more money left over at the end of the game. I really like this aspect. It's very much not necessarily a political issue game, even though there are issues that come up and you maybe question sort of the validity of like, okay, why does this lower the West and things like that. It's very much from the perspective of the campaign manager in dealing with these things and trying to strategically build up, in a more of a sense of just winning the campaign, not necessarily, trying to have any sort of political statement from the game itself, but just the sort of the intricacies. And I think it does a fair job of simulating sort of the modern campaign and what that all means. So you also have a vice presidential nominee token here that you're going to be moving from the headquarters to the board. And there's a couple other little markers here. These triangle markers here, when you get the bear card and the bull card, let's take a look at one of these. So if you got this bear card or bull card here, excuse me, and let's say you were the incumbent in the South, you're going to go ahead and put a +1 regional economy marker there. So that's going to give you die roll modifiers to your rolls when you try to advertise and sort of do campaigning in this region. Again, if you weren't the incumbent, you'd flip it over and get the -1 regional marker like so. And then there's a scandal marker here, which is an interesting marker I'll talk about in a second. And on the flip side of that is your surrogate marker, which acts as a positive influence for you. So you go ahead and put that over here as well. And then you've got your opposition markers here. So you can see there's sort of a yellow side and an orange side. And some of them are more difficult to play against than others. You can see the orange side here, it actually has only 1 die, where the yellow side on the vice president has 2, and the presidential yellow side has 3, and where the orange side he has 2. And then there's also a surrogate which comes up now and again. So these are going to be over here for the most part. Sometimes they'll be back here to the holding box, but they're going to be over here on this board. And they're going to be basically campaigning against you. So let me just quickly go over the actions. First thing you're going to be doing, and you're going to be doing this a lot, is advertising. It's basically spend $1, pick a region, and then advertise. And then you're going to roll and try to beat this number. Now you're going to apply any modifiers from any regional economy markers. If you have the presidential nominee, you can actually flip it over to the use side, and that'll let you actually roll 2 dice, and then you can pick one. Basically, if you beat this number, then you're going to move it up. Now the trick with having this in advertising is it also makes you sort of susceptible to sort of negative advertising in a sense. So if I were to pull this card, and then I see this as a South, so if it's set in advertising, it's automatically just going to go down. There's nothing I can do about it. But one of the actions you can do on your turn is to change mode in a region. So you spend $1 and you flip this over, and now you're in campaign mode, sort of a defensive mode. So in this case, if I'm in the defensive mode and this gets pulled, then I can actually roll and do a little bit of defense. And again, I can apply die roll modifiers. But in this case, if I have the vice presidential nominee, I can use him to make him re-roll 2 dice. And then if I get greater than this number, then it's defended, it's fine. However, if I'm less than or equal to, then it's going to drop down anyway. Now, one interesting thing about this is if you roll an odd, unmodified number, this is automatically going to flip to advertising no matter what. And I kind of like that because you kind of want to get this in advertising mode anyway, so if it does drop down, you do fail the campaign, you want to go right into advertising anyway to get it back up. So that's kind of nice, but again, it leaves you a lot more susceptible to negative attacks. Next thing you can do is move your presidential or vice presidential marker for $1. And I should have said that actually at the start of your turn, you can actually move these for free. And if you've actually used them, so let's say I used them in the north on the previous turn, then I have to unflip them and I have to move them and keep them sort of on the ball, sort of, traveling, doing his work, hitting the ground game, really hitting the floor, going door to door, all that stuff, kissing babies, all that good stuff. Now, one thing that's nice that I could do is if I had a used presidential marker here and I wanted to do some advertising, then I could move the vice presidential there, flip him, and this will actually unflip that. So it's a special little power if these are in the same area. Another thing you could do with one of the nominee markers is if you get this scandal marker put out, let's say in the Midwest here, then what this is actually going to do is you're going to actually have to roll defense against this region at the end of the turn again. So again, if this is advertising, then you're going to immediately take the hit. But what you can do is you can actually move a marker here, use it, and it'll put this right back over into the holding box. Next thing you can do is you can spend $2 and then draw one of these opposition research cards. Again, some of these are October surprises, and some of these have no effect, so it's basically a waste. But you can see that, no effect. But most of them, some of them will actually bump up an area, things like that. And that's pretty much what you're going to do. There's a little bit more detail. I don't want to mire you in the detail. The game is very simple and plays pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of sort of little things to keep in mind, and it's going to take you a game or two. It took me 2 games to learn how to play this correctly, so I missed a couple of things like the odd die roll, flips to advertising, and things like that. But it does play quickly, so it's not a huge deal. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the overview. It's a very quick game. It sort of fits the mood of the time right now. One thing that's interesting about it is sort of seeing these minutiae sort of drawn every turn with different news cards. And like one of them will be the unemployment numbers are good or bad. And maybe that's going to decide a state. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know how truthful it is that something like that would actually sort of sway voters and how much voters are actually swayed. One of the things that's been talked about, and again, I don't know how true it is, I'm not an expert on this, is like how everybody's really been locked in this case for the last 4 years or so. Everybody's like, okay, I'm voting one way or the other, for whatever reason. So, but I think there's some truth to sort of how the campaign itself is sort of played out in the media and stuff like that. It's sort of interesting to see, how these different things happen and which different states are affected, or which different regions, I should say, are affected by certain events. The special powers on the cards are pretty cool, and they're just neat. It's just fun to think about like how the translation from reality to the cards actually is. Like an example, Ron Paul always gets an extra buck when he debates because he has a lot of, he gets a lot of the supporters, coming in at the debate and giving him lots of money. Obama has a thing where if the scandal marker comes out, then he's automatically used because the scandals have such a drastic effect on him. But he also starts the game off with one of the opposition research cards. So he has a little bit more of a sort of a tactical, sort of strategic advantage going into the game. I like that it sort of stays away from really specifying issues. So the game even says you can make your own candidates up. It gives you some guidelines from creating your own cards. The box says swing states #1, so maybe they'll do another one in 4 years with some of the candidates from them. No, maybe they'll come out with sort of sort of expansions from older elections. You can sort of do alternative history and kind of play with that. And I like how you can play with the news deck and sort of set that up and see sort of how these things evolve. And it's kind of nice just to kind of sit back and play and look at the card and go, okay, yeah, remember when the unemployment numbers came out and they made a lot of big deal about it, or didn't make a big deal about this. So it's interesting because it's very abstracted and not issue driven, which, you know, a lot of people think the campaigns aren't very issue driven either. They're more about the spectacle of the thing. And so this is sort of falls in line with that. And I'd like to see it's a quick filler game. I'd like to see sort of this aspect explored further. I think this sort of psychological thing. It's kind of interesting. You know, to break down sort of the math and the science of economics through this sort of emotional type of thing that seems to come out of people. So yeah, I would take a look at it, and hopefully they'll come out with more stuff for it and keep it sort of fresh. Okay, thanks.